During most years, Parsha Shmini is read after Pesach, and during the days of Svira, we finish Sefer Vayikra, as we will this year, B'Yaz Hashem Yisbarach, and we begin the Midbar before Shavuos. The Svarim HaKadoshim say that eating matzah brings a munah into the heart of a person. Matzah is referred to as Nichla de Mehemenusa. Through eating matzah properly throughout the days of Pesach, that a Yid is margish, a Yid feels a certain amunah in the Rebbeinu Shalom. B'chlal, Pesach is a time of year that amunah is channeled into the Jewish heart. It's pumped in then. On Pesach, we draw our amunah for the rest of the year. Just like the Ramban says, at the end of Parshas Bar, that Yetzias Mitzrayim is the yisoid of amunah for all generations. So each year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to pump that amunah into us. And Pesach is sort of the gas station for the amunah, if you can forgive the analogy. Now, if you have a brand new house and you're bringing your packages and furniture in for the very first time, so you're going to give those walls and the floor a thorough cleaning. Now, of course, every Erev Shabbos you're going to clean it. But if your dira, your apartment is brand new, or your closet is brand new, and you're now putting in your possessions for the very first time, you want it to really stand on a very clean basis. And that is why the Sfas Emes explains Chametz, which is merumas on the Yetzer Hara, has to be totally uprooted Pesach time. Because Pesach, you can get a new shipment of Amunah. Our bodies become like a brand new apartment, ready for the furniture of Amunah to be brought in for the first time. And therefore we want to make sure it's perfectly clean. The Maharal says that the Seder night is called Seder because it organizes the ruchnius of a person, the hergeshim, the feelings of a person for Yiddishkeit throughout the entire year. And the same is true for the entire Pesach. The Beis Zayin says one who doesn't do tshuva on Pesach, and one who doesn't stop and think, Rebbeinu Shalom, please channel that amunah into my heart, one who doesn't sort of prepare himself for this, is doima to the people who died during the Shloshis Yemei HaSeilah. They also knew Geula was imminent, but they sort of disassociated themselves from it. You have to apply yourself to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, okay, I'm ready, it's still Pesach. My heart is here, please fill me up with amunah. Now the issue of eating machalos asuros, staying away from non-kosher food, is also important to amunah. That, of course, pertains to the entire year. The Rambam writes that in a letter to people who were struggling with their amunah during the most difficult times. He cautions them to be extra careful with machalis asuros. The lashon of the Rambam at the end of Hilchos Machalis Asuros is v'chol hanizar b'dvarim elu mevi kiddusha v'tahara yiseiru l'nafshay. One who is careful in all of the halachos of kashrus brings upon himself a holiness, a purity, an extra holiness and purity to his nefesh. He cleans out his nefesh. As the pasuk says, "V'skadashtem v'yisam kedash." So clearly, what's happening over here is that during Pesach we're given to eat this matzah, which brings the mun into our heart, and then we are cautioned after Pesach, after the medicine has taken its effect, and we were cleaned. We have this brand new power of faith within us. Don't allow it to be lost through machalis asuros. So we read Parshas Shmini even before, during, and after Pesach. If you're going to prescribe a medicine to someone, of course the background has to be making sure not to take anything that's negative to the medicine. The machalis asuros that's in our body prevents the master from doing its job. A famous story that's brought down, Rabbi Akiva Eiger came to a certain town, and parents came to him for brachas for their children. And one set of parents came and they cried about a son who seemed to suddenly lose his whole cheshik in Yiddishkeit. He was a promising young masmid, had a tremendous cheshik to learn and daven, and it just stopped short. He sits in his bed a whole day, doesn't want to get out of his house, lost not only his enthusiasm, he seemed to have lost his basic infrastructure of Yiddishkeit. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger, after realizing that these were indeed parents who gave their children a proper chinuch in a setting of proper chinuch, not allowing other influences to come into the house to expose the child to things that he ought not to see, why should such a thing happen? So Rabbi Akiva Eiger said that it's certain to him the child must have eaten something non-kosher. And the parents were perplexed by this, because it was a known thing that this particular family was extra makbid in all the dikduke halachas of kashrus. Where, what, when, where would this child eat something not kosher? And in this little town in Europe, where would the child even find something that's not kosher? So Chakiris and Drishas began massive investigations. They discussed things with the child, exactly what he did, where he did, with whom he did, for the last 6 months. And the following came up. It turned out that one day, on his way home from yeshiva, he was asked to come into a hall to prepare for a chassan over there, to help the caterer prepare. And he stayed a little bit during the chassan and he went home. But the hall was a fine hall with an excellent hashgach. And the chickens that were brought there were shechted by the local town shaykhid. In Erlich Yid, however, there was an issue about this chasana, which was related to a different type of kashrus. It was a second marriage, and the previous get was questionable. And many Rabbanim told her to wait until she would get a more concrete get that didn't have any smekas. But she did not want to wait. The man who was marrying her laughed off what the Rabbanim told him, to wait a little bit until the issue could be more clarified. And the Rav Shulchan Aruch, the Baal Tanya, writes that chasana was done against the will of the Chachamim. And the Baal Tanya was so upset about this, he wrote that whoever eats meat or chicken by this chasana, you should know that it is done as if he's eating something which is completely treif. And this child was there, and he ate from the food of this chasana. Amunah, and what we take into our body, goes hand in hand. The Emunah Sitacha points out a most interesting thing. In the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, there are 2 svarim that are termed Sefer Kiddusha and Sefer Tahar. All of the mitzvahs, all of the halachas that pertain to either holiness or purity, the Rambam categorizes them into these 2 svarim. Now there's an interesting thing. If you look at all of the mitzvahs that the Rambam enumerates in Sefer Kiddusha and Sefer Tahara, we virtually find all of them in the parshiyos that we read between Pesach and Shavuos. In the Sefer Kiddusha of the Rambam, we have all of the dinim of behemoths, oifos, dogim tameim, which behemoths, which birds, which fish are kosher, and that's read in this week's parsha, in Parsha Shmini. The Rambam also discusses in Sefer Kiddusha the Yisurim of Tavel, produce where no proper trumas inaises were taken from it, and that we read in Parshas Emor. The halachos of shrots and creeping things and insects that the Rambam discusses is in Parsha Shmini. The halachos of nevela and treifa is in this big Parsha, Parsha Shmini. The Yisur of dam, of not drinking blood, in Parshas Achrei. The Yisur of orla and klayim. The Yisur of not eating the fruit the first 3 years that it grows in the tree. The Yisur of klayim, the mixture of different plants, is found in Parshas Kedoshim. The Yisur of oisei v'yezdenoi, not shechting an animal and its young on the same day, is in Parshas Emor. The Yisur of chodosh, not eating the new tefillah, Parshas Emor. So all of the Yisur Echila that the Rambam explains to us in his Sefer under the category of Sefer Kiddusha are during these parshiyos. There are, however, some exceptions. Avram and Achai, Chalev, Basa B'Cholov, Yayin Nesach, and Shah Niskul. Those are in the Rambam Sefer Kiddusha, and they're not found in the parshiyos that we read between Pesach and Shavuos, but we'll get back to those soon, B'Yez Hashem Yisrach. In the Rambam Sefer HaKiddusha, we also find the halachas of all the arayos. In Hilchos Yisur Diyah, the women one is not permitted to marry. And these are also found in these parshiyos, in the Parshas Kedoshim and the Parshas Achrei. The Yisur Diyah of a Kohen Gadol and a Kohen Hediyah, the particular halachas of marriage would apply to a Kohen in Parshas Emor. So we see that the vast majority of things that fall into the category of Sefer Kiddusha are found in the parshiyos that we read from Pesach to Shavuos. Now, let's go to the Rambam's Sefer Tahara, the things he puts under the category of purity. You have all the halachas of Tumas Siras, halachis of Tumah, if the Zav sits or lays on an item, the halachis of food that become tummy, the halachis of kalim that become tummy. You have most of these in Parshiyos Tazria, Mitzayra, and Shmini. The halachis of mikvah, rak me'enu bar mikvah mayim, tumas yoldus, nida, ziva, they're all in Tazria, Mitzayra. The only thing that is missing, the only thing that the Rambam does enumerate in his Sefer Tahara and is not found in the Parshiyos between Pesach and Shavuos are the halachis of tumas mes and its subsequent Tahara through the Parah Aduma. That's of course in Parashat Chukas. Now we know that these days between Pesach and Shavuos are special days to us. They are the days that prepare us for Kabbalah Satar. Many tzaddikim refer to the Yemei Asir as the big Chalamoy between Pesach and Shavuos. The Ashpois that come to us through these days comes through the reading of the Pasha. That's why it's called Mikra Kodesh, through the Kriya of the Pasha. On the Orah of this man, the Zohar Kodesh says that each week is crowned with the Pasha of the week. It's not just a practical thing that we proportion the Torah this way. What we read in the Pasha of the week has a shaykhus to part and parcel of the Yid's life during the week. So during these 6 weeks of Sfira, that is notwithstanding the first week, the week of Pesach, which is this man of Kachenu v'Tareinu, that we seek holiness and we seek purity. So we are Isaac in all of the psukim that pertain to the Sefer Kiddush and to the Sefer Tahar. Okay, granted, the union of Tumas Mes, as we just explained, isn't found in these Parshiyos. But on the other hand, it's included in the Etzem Hayom of Mikra Kodesh of Yom HaChanishim of Matan Torah. The whole union of Matan Torah was, when we got the Luchais, we received a Cheirus Mimalach HaMaves. The Tal of Pchias HaMesim came down, as the Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos, together with Matan Torah. The Malach HaMaves became Batal, Misa became Batal, Tumas Mes became Batal, until it returned by the Maisa Ego. So Memela, this aspect of Tahara, which is really the greatest level of Tahara, which purifies a person from the most severe Tumah, the Aviyah Vaisa Tumah, which is Tumas Nes, is really also found in Yemei Sefira. As a matter of fact, the whole days of the Sefira to prepare us for the day of Shavuos, which represents the ultimate Tahara. And therefore, included in that automatically are also the Yisurim of Yayin Nesach, which the Gemara equates to Zivchei Mesim. Gid Hanosha, which represents the Samach Mem, Yaakov's ultimate battle with the Yetzer Hara, is also part of the Malach HaMaves that becomes Batal on Shavuos. And the Yisur of Shah Nisko, which is the Shah that killed a person, and as a result has to be stoned, is connected to death, to pain. That's why we have to destroy the Shah. And that too is included in the Chayris Mi Malach HaMaves that comes on Shavuos. So what else do we say was left out? The Yisur of Basa B'Cholov. 3 times the Torah mentions Basa B'Cholov. Neither of them are read in any of the Parshiyos between Pesach and Shavuos, but they are included in the Rambam's Sefer Kiddusha. But on the other hand, Basa B'Cholov has a lot to do with the Shavuos again. Because of the Zehirus of this Aveira, we are Zeichet to Chag HaShavuos. The whole Shavuos evolves about the chief boinses. And that's the minig that we think of that personifies Shavuos. Because when the Yidden heard by Matan Torah the Yisurim of Basa B'Cholov, they couldn't use their kalim. So the whole Shavuos, that's what everyone was talking about. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? I don't have any meat anymore. I can't use those kalim anymore. And everyone sat down to eat the cheese. So somehow Basa B'Cholov is directly related to the Kiddush of the day. The Yisur of Abram and Achai is included in the mitzvah of Shchita, which is Metayer in the Abram and Achai. And the mitzvah of Shchita is mentioned in Pasha Shmini and at the end of Pasha's Kedoshim. So it's not directly, by extension, all in Yonim that are listed in Sefer Kiddush and Tahar and the Rambam are included in these days. One more thing that the Rambam lists in the halachas of Yisuri Biyah, the Yisuri Kahal, meaning the women that a person cannot marry because of who they come from, not per se who they are, not because of a particular relationship, not because she's a relative to him, but that too is included in Shavuos, because we read Ruth, and the whole reading of Ruth is a declaration that despite all the controversy around David HaMelech, Ruth that comes from Moav is still the grandmother of David HaMelech, the valid grandmother of David HaMelech. So as a result, either directly or by extension, the entire Sefer Kiddusha and Tahara is somehow related to the Parshias of the Svira or included in the Achana to Shavuos. So if we have to take a good look at the Sefer Kiddush and Sefer Tahara of the Rambam, did we get everything in? There's one more. The Rambam discusses in the Halachis of Mechalis Asuras the Yisra of Chaylev, the forbidden fat. And the Yisra of Chaylev is not mentioned during any of these Parshiyos, so how do we fit that in? So first of all, it is mentioned in Parshas Tzav. And Parshas Tzav is a Hachana for the Yemei HaSir, the Hachana for Pesach. Besides for that, others understand that the Yisra of Chaylev is because Chaylev by Karbonis goes up on the Mizbeach. Therefore, you're not supposed to use the Chaylev Stam for yourself. That being the case, the Yimon Sitach explains, so Chaylev doesn't really fall into this category, even though the Rambam lists it together with the other Machalis Asurais, but there's a different reason why you can't eat Chaylev. And despite the severity of the punishment, there's an intercurrence for Chaylev, but it's really in a category for itself. And perhaps we can add another factor to Pasha Shmini being the Haskalah, the opening Pasha, the introduction to the Yemei HaSir. The Kabrina explains, as it's brought down in the Sefer Torah Tzavos, we begin with the Mishkan, opening day for the Mishkan, and during the Shivas Yemei HaMeluyim, they were constantly practicing taking apart the Mishkan and putting it back together. And in general, the Mishkan was something that they took apart and reassembled with every move. And that's to teach us, even if your life fell apart, your ruchniistic life fell apart, you ate the wrong things, you said the wrong things, you don't seem to be living with the days of the Sfira, the Kiddush and Tahara, and not penetrating, chas v'shalom, you should give up. You can just reassemble it. The Yemen refers to the constant reassembling of the Mishkan. Even if you feel that your ruchniistic life fell apart, so put it back together. The whole Mishkan was structured that way. Zehadava, think that you can always do tshuva and come back, and then vayera alechem kivod Hashem. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to say to Aaron, or explain to Aaron, what had happened to Nadav and Avihu. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon hu asher diber Hashem leimar. This is what Hashem said. The kroivei HaKadosh. To those that are close to me, there will be a Kiddush Hashem. And before all the people, I will be glorified. What happened with your son was a source of Kiddush Hashem. And Vayidai Aaron remained silent. And Aaron HaKohen will go down in the annals of history as the source of this tremendous ability, which of course is a lot easier said than done, of Vayidai Aaron, of accepting HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Gzeira, even under the most difficult circumstances, by not responding with a hava. Whatever you do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good. Now, if you look in the Rashi on this pasuk, Kapitel Gimel, pasuk Gimel, take note that Rashi seems to explain the pasuk in a different order. Rashi begins, Hu Asher Diber, and Rashi explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu that there would be a great Kiddush Hashem to show the people just how powerful the Mishkan is, just what Hashoas HaShechina means, and just how you have to adhere to the halachas and the boundaries, and each one can't go off on his own. And Moshe Rabbeinu thought that it would be either through he himself or through Aaron, and now I see it was through your children, that in a certain sense must be greater. Fine. Then Rashi goes to explain the end of the pasuk. Vayidai Maharin. Aaron HaKohen remained silent, and Rashi explains, Kibul Schar Shtikasai, he was Makabel Schar for this silence. What was the Schar? The Schar was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would speak directly to Aaron in regard to the Parsha of Shisuya Yayin, that Kohanim aren't supposed to drink wine and then do the Avodah. And then Rashi goes back to explain the middle of the pasuk. How when a Kiddush Hashem is performed through tzaddikim, it leaves such a powerful mark, and so on. And some type of an explanation as to what happened with Nadav and Avihu. How come Rashi doesn't explain the pasuk in the order of how the pasuk appears? What propelled Rashi over here to rush with the Vayida Naharin and explain the Indian of Vayida Naharin before Moshe Rabbeinu's explanation of what happened? Why didn't Rashi go with the order of the pasuk? The Schwab in the Sefer in the end days of Shieza
explains that if you take a closer look at the pasuk, you'll see that this message of sort of rushing up the Vayida Mahari even before the end of the pasuk is merumas in the Taimei HaMikra. If you look in the Chumash, you will see Vayomer Moshe El HaHaron Hu Asher Diber Hashem, and this is what Hashem has said, and then there's a line over there after the Hashem. That vertical line usually indicates that there is some type of a hefsek in the pasuk. That there's some type of an end of an inyan, and even though it's in the same pasuk, it's within the context of the same pasuk, but there's a break over here, and then we're discussing something else. But this vertical line seems very difficult to explain. And this is what Hashem said, Leimar, saying that the Krovi HaKadosh. So why the hefsek between the Hashem and the Leimar? Moshe Rabbeinu saying, and this is what Hashem said. So between Hashem and said, there are two different inyanim. There's some type of a break over here. What is the message over here in this line? Rosh Hashanah explains that the answer to both kashas is the same. Vayida Maharin is Lashon Ava. It's in the past tense. Aaron already decided to remain silent even before he heard Moshe Rabbeinu's explanation of how this would be a great Kiddush Hashem. In other words, what happened over here? Aaron receives the shocking news about Nadav and Avihu. Moshe runs to console Aaron. Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, Hu Asher Diber Hashem. This is what Hashem said. Stop right here. When Aaron heard these words from Moshe Rabbeinu, this is a gzeila from Hashem, right away in his heart, he said, I accept it. Vayida Maharin, shtika. No explanations, no biurim. It really doesn't make a difference. Why, when, where. This is what Hashem did. Ad kan, it stops right here. Already in Aaron's heart there was shtika. Of course Moshe Rabbeinu went on to finish. And this is what Hashem said, that B'Krovi HaKadosh, that it would be a Kiddush Hashem, and so on and so on. But that is irrelevant, really, to the Vayida Maharin. Even before Aaron HaKohen heard anything about why, about for what, there was already a Vayida Maharin. So, in terms of the overall pasuk, the pasuk is telling us what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu said, this is what Hashem said. Moshe went on to say what Hashem said. And waiting for Aaron's response, Vayida Maharin, there was no response. But if you take a closer look at the pasuk is telling us more. This decision of no response, of acceptance, came in Aaron's heart well before Moshe Rabbeinu finished the explanation, well before he even started the explanation. It came right after Hu Asher Diber Hashem. This is what Hashem wanted. That is the message in the line after Hu Asher Diber Hashem, because right there and then, as far as Aaron's heart and his decision was concerned, the discussion was over. Hashem said it, so he's mekabel it. And that's why Rashi rushes to explain the Vayida Maharin even before Moshe Rabbeinu's explanation. Because in terms of what the people saw, they saw Aaron silent after Moshe finished. But in terms of what happened, in terms of what is merumas in the pasuk, Rashi wants to remind us that it wasn't shot Aaron heard the explanation and said, Kiddush Hashem, that's what happened. Okay, I accept it. No. The Vayida Maharin was well before the explanation. Regardless of what the explanation would have been, there was already a Vayida Maharin. And there's a very powerful message over here. Because if a person strikes in hard times, so the feeling is, but explain it to me, the Rebbeinu Shalom. Tell me why. Like the Chassam Sofer says, Hareni nos k'vaydecha. Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, I know Golus is going to be difficult. But just explain to us the reasons, why we're suffering step by step, why this has to happen, why there has to be a Spanish Inquisition, why there has to be a Gzeir of Tach V'Tat, why there has to be crusades. Just give us an explanation as it's happening, a description of every single scene in Jewish history. We'll accept it. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say to Moshe Rabbeinu? You can see me from the back. Ifane lo yiro. So the Chassam Sofer, after it all happens, there will come a time, whether on this world or the next, you'll understand exactly everything why it had to happen. Why it was all tired. Down here on this world, rationalizations, explanations, it doesn't help. It may soothe a little bit to be given to understand what the tielis was, what the purpose was in difficulties. But if our shtika, if our ability to accept Hashem's Gezeira depends on whether or not we understand it or are willing to accept the explanation, it's not going to work anyhow. During a difficult time, no explanation in the world is really enough. The Vayidim Aharon came right after Hu Asher Diber Hashem. Okay, he heard it, and I should have to say there was a Kiddush Hashem, there was an Indian over here, but that was irrelevant. If the decision of Shtika comes simply, Hu Asher Diber Hashem, then that is the greatest hamtaka of the Gezeira. And sometimes, as the Baal Shem Tov explains, that within itself can change the Gezeira. By recognizing whatever happens is Hu Asher Diber Hashem. You can listen to explanations. You can try to rationalize. But if your Vayida Naharin hinges on whether or not the explanation is acceptable to you, it doesn't work. If you decided anyhow on Vayida Naharin, regardless of whether or not you understand, that's the Madrega. That's how Aaron HaKohen was zecher to a special Hashra for Shechina. Again, a lot easier said than done. Rav Shlomo Chaim Baruch goes on to explain, in Emes Yatzav we say, Asher Yish, Sheyishma L'mitzvaysecha, V'seiravcha Udvarcha Yasim Alibay. L'chayr, that's a pel. What does it mean if it's V'seiravcha, your Torah, Udvarcha, and your words, Yasim Alibay, he will place on his heart. What is the difference between V'seiravcha and Dvarcha? Isn't the Torah the words of Hashem? Even the words of the Nevi'im are included b'chlal Torah shebeksav. That's the Chazal were misakin that Hamakter the Navi should at least read 3 psukim in HaTorah to show that the words of the Nevi'im are included b'chlal HaTorah. So what is the two independent messages over here? What is the Seirach and what is the Devarcha? So the Schwab explains based on a Ramban, Udevarcha means Hu Asher Diber Hashem. If a person has a Gezeira that he has to endure, that is a Diber HaMiyuchad Eilav. When Aaron HaKohen had to deal with his suffering, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Aaron through Moshe, this is not a Hefker Welt. Hu Asher Diber Hashem. Everything that is happening over here is happening with Hashgacha. This Seirafcha, your Torah. Your Torah refers to your life experiences and the understanding that this is your stage. You have the Torah, you have the mitzvahs, you have to now apply it to whatever your particular circumstances are. Udevarcha Yasim Aliva is the Messiah. To understand that even during the inevitable ups and downs in life, the minor and major crises, Udevarcha. These were Hashem's words to you. Hu Asher Diber Hashem. And Yasim Alibay, to try to emulate the ways of Aaron HaKohen, of acceptance, of Ayida Mahara. You can deal with it in many different ways. But before you hear any explanations or try to rationalize, the Ayida Mahara already has to be set in place. That has to be the overriding feeling in your heart. Rahman al-Islam, what do we say to a novel? Hamakayim yinachin nefcha. What does the Gemara say to someone who had a loss, a business loss? Hamakayim yimalich hasrinech. Why is it when it comes to consoling, we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Hamakayim? In the Haggadah, we also say Baruch Hamakayim Baruch Hu, who gave Torah to Klal Yisrael, and who gave us 4 different kinds of children. From some we have Nachas, from some we have the opposite of such Rahman al-Islam. There's a Chacham, there's a Rosh, there's a Tam, there's a Sheni, Dei Elisha. It seems whenever there is something difficult to accept, the introduction to explaining the relationship of Hashgacha to this is Hamakayim. Rav Shlomo Chaim Baruch explains why do we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Hamakayim? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Memale Kol Alma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sustains the entire world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere. Hamakayim means place. Wherever you are, regardless of where that dimension is, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there. When a person undergoes a difficult experience, so the natural reaction is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not here. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was here, then how did HaKadosh Baruch Hu let this happen? So therefore, when the person is ready to be consoled, the first word of consolement is Hamakim. Hu Asher Diber Hashem. Nothing is hefker. Nothing happened by chance. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here. Hamakim. The Rebbeinu Shalom is in every place. And really that's the whole consolement. Hu Asher Diber Hashem. There is a reason. Then we go into the therapy. It's going to get better, you're going to get over this, and so on. But the Yesod Hadavar begins and ends with the word Hamakim. Nothing is hefker. But the Hashem is everywhere. And of course there's the Indian of Rayu Adam Shiyasuim, Boyam Elav Yifashvish B'maisa, and we look to be toiler why it happened, and how can I be misaken myself? How can I do tshuva? All of that is within the process of the prescribed method of dealing with the crisis. But only after the Hagdam, that Hamakim. Then, there are all sorts of things that have to be dealt with, all sorts of issues, which we rarely can find an answer for down here in this world. Is this an einish for something I did down here? Let me be mefashvish b'maiseh. What did I do wrong? How can I do tshuva? How can I be mesakin it? Is it an einish in a previous go-go? Did it have to be this way for whatever reason? Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to know. Why there's tzaddik v'ra'aloi v'rasha v'tayvlo? All of that are valid questions that can be dealt with only after the Hagdama is in place. And that Hagdama consists of one word. Hamakim. If you understand Hamakim, that it's not hefker, then that is the source for all nechamas. That is a virtual guarantee that the person, regardless of how difficult it is going to get over it. And it's interesting to note that Ramban says, L'choyer was a peladik azach. Vayidem Aaron, why was Aaron silent? Dr. Ramban, because he was crying, and therefore he couldn't talk. The time Vayidem Aaron, quote, Shayaboicha bekoil, the oath shasak. So what the Ramban is saying is, of course Aaron couldn't answer. How can a person cry and answer at the same time? But the emes, if you take a closer look at the words of the Ramban, there's a much more powerful message over here, and it's not a steer at all with the way Rashi learned. The Ramban is saying, let a person not be naive. Aaron claimed to say the worst possible news of the world. 2 of his sons had been consumed. Of course Aaron Akain cried. Of course there was an emotional response of grief, of pain. The pasuk isn't saying that Aaron was totally oblivious to the event. His son died. Oh, Hashem said it should happen. Okay, no problem. Of course Aaron Akain was reeling from the shock. But the Oz Shasak, no one is immune to crying under those circumstances. But his tears came in the form of Rebbeinu Shalom, I know you did it. I know that this world is not hefker. It has to be accepted. The same way the passing of Nadav and Avihu has to be accepted. The natural grief that would follow also has to be accepted. The Oz Shasak. Aaron Akain's crying was part of the shtika. His expression, his emotional need was all part of the Gzeira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Aaron Akain recognized that with the very first tear. The Rebbeinu Shalom, I accept this grief that I have to go through. The pasuk is not saying Aaron didn't cry. The pasuk is saying Aaron accepted his crying. Not that they weren't suffering anymore. They were in Gan Eden. It was Aaron Akain who was suffering. It was Aaron's wife who was suffering. It was Aaron's family who was suffering. And this is what the Vayidem Aharon refers to. Within the crying itself, there is a very fine line that separates 2 completely different worlds. There is a crying and grief of anger. There is a crying and grief of acceptance. One type of crying brings a person closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom and ultimately consolement, and the other type of crying has exactly the opposite effect. The Ramban is telling us that the Vayidem Aharon defines the nature of Aaron Akain's tears. Now Aaron Akain's schar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking to him directly, explains the Sefer Darkei Musa was not in the form of, okay, this is how we're going to pay you back for a proper response. Because of Aaron Akain's response, therefore, he was a different Aaron Akain. As great as a tzaddik as he was beforehand, he was now elevated to a completely different plateau, light years over the great Madrega he was before the Vayida Aaron. And as a result, he was Zaycha to more Hashras Hashchina. It was an automatic thing because of Aaron's higher Madrega, an elevation that any Yid is privy to, if one learns how to remain silent. There were once two people desperately looking for a Rebbe. They wanted to be Makabel, someone upon himself, to be their Moraderach, to be their leader in life, someone they can seek counsel with, learn from. And they heard about the Tzaddik Rameir of Pramishlan, so they traveled to the Pramishlan. Nothing about that Shabbos seemed to go well. The trip was a difficult trip. They got there, mamish by Lakas Haneris. They went into shul, they dived in. Afterwards, the two of them just stared at each other, wondering what they were going to do next, until finally, two people came over to them and, well, semi-graciously invited them over to their homes. Both did not go to the same place. One went to one balabas, and the other went to a different balabas. And both of these people, unfortunately, left their Friday night Suda quite hungry. One person had this problem. The balabas ate very little. And seeing the balabas eating only a drop of challah and a drop of fish and a drop of soup, so he was sort of embarrassed to eat any more than the balabas himself was eating. Now the other one went to a balabas that was eating a lot, but gave very little to his guest. He cut only a small piece of challah, gave it to him. The guest was embarrassed to cut a larger piece for himself. The balabas devoured huge amounts of food and did a lot of talking, but it didn't seem to bother the host that his guest had very little on his own plate. So the two of them came to the tish that night quite hungry. For whatever reason, they didn't have such a good time by the tish either, and afterwards, they went to a third place, this time the two of them together, where they would spend the night. They were embarrassed, but they asked for food, and the man apologized and said, I don't have any to give you. Whatever I have, I need for the Suda tomorrow. Here, I'll scratch together something. So once again, they refused to eat. And basically this repeated itself until Shalashudas, and they were wondering how they had made the mistake of coming here to start with. Right before Shalashudas, they noticed Rameir from Islam standing outside feeding the birds, feeding the chickens. His chickens, you're not allowed to feed other chickens on Shabbos. And then he turned around to go into the tish. So they decided that this is it. They just had enough. People that don't give them to eat, rebbes that feed chickens before Shalashudas, maybe they had best look elsewhere for some type of guide in life. They would have gone back to their hosts, but their respective hosts weren't home. So they had no choice but to come back to the Rebbe for Shalashudas. As Shalashudas started, and as is customary by Chassidim in the dark, Rameir of Pamishlan suddenly stopped, and he declared, who are the two young men who came over here looking for a tzaddik who was a Baal Ruach HaKodesh? Who are they? Now, for obvious reasons, our two friends did not answer. Rameir of Pamishlan repeated the question and finally said, if those two who came here for Shabbos looking for a Baal Ruach HaKodesh as a Rebbe don't answer, they're going to regret it. So the two looked at each other and stepped forward. Rameir of Pamishlan asked them, where did you eat your Sudas Shabbos? The two didn't answer. So Rameir of Pamishlan, knowing very well that those two hosts were seated in the crowd, spoke to the whole Olam at large, and he said, in the Torah Gesha there is a mitzvah of Hachnasas Orchim, and it's a wonderful thing to go over and to invite guests Friday night. But you also have to know that when you invite a guest, you don't skimp for yourself so that the guest himself is embarrassed to eat. If you see that your eating little is causing the guest to eat a little, then you eat a lot. And if you're cutting bread for yourself, at least cut that same piece of bread for your guest. Don't you realize he's going to be embarrassed to cut himself? And everyone is sort of shishking to each other. I mean, this was Shalashudas. This was the time that the Rebbe would say the Torah on the Seder, that he would reveal secrets in the Torah. The Rameir of Pamishlan and Shalashudas Torah famous throughout the countryside. What was the Rebbe doing this Shabbos? How come he wasn't saying anything that had to do with the Sedra? Why was he giving lessons in Achnasas Orchim? So the Rebbe, perhaps listening to these questions, started saying his Torah on the pasuk. He said, in this week's Sedra it says, Es ha-chazir, ki mafris parsahu. Now let eat the chazer. Why? Ki mafris parsa. Literally it has split hoofs. It also means mafris parsa. He cuts pieces of a mitzi. But who gera la yigar. But he doesn't chew his cud. He cuts pieces but doesn't eat himself. And as a result, The guest doesn't eat because he's embarrassed. The balabas is not eating. How can I eat? Sagt the Torah, Tanei hu lachem. This is considered Tanei. On whose cheshbon are you being a tzaddik? You don't realize you're not eating is not allowing your guest to eat? On whose cheshbon are you being from? And furthermore, the Torah says there's another animal, Esagomel, the camel. Kimali Gelu. Oh, the Gomel, the camel, chews its cud, he eats plenty. But he parsain and umafris. Literally doesn't have split hoofs. The male of Pamishlanatach, but he doesn't cut anything up for his guest. He's also Tomei Hulachem. This is also considered Tumah. What did you think the guest is going to take on his own? Tahar is only someone who eats and gives to someone else. And at that point, the tzaddik took 2 huge pieces of challah, 2 big pieces of fish, and handed it over to the 2 hungry young men. He also went on to dash and other things about animals, secrets of animals that we find in this week's Pasha. And within the course of his Torah, he explains the sidais of feeding your own animals. Why the Torah Kedusha says you're mechuyev to feed your animals before you eat yourself. And in particular, he spoke about feeding birds, and then they understood. And they decided that as difficult as that first Shabbos was, they were going to spend many more in Pramishlan. Now, interestingly enough, it would appear that this Taish from Rameel Pramishlan works out very well with a beer from the Vilna Gaon on why kosher animals have to have split hoofs and why they have to chew their cud. In regard to birds, we find that any bird that attacks or rips something up is tame. And the Indian is, the Kadmonim explained this, that when a person eats something, it becomes part of him. And the nature of what he eats becomes the nature of the eater. Now the Vilna Gaon explains that all averos, all sins, really have their origins in chemda, in jealousy. We understand that loy sachmait is koilo all of the Aseres HaDibros, and the Aseres HaDibros is koilo kolaterikul. And that is why in ois ha'toires, a bird that preys, a bird that attacks, well, that's a symbol that this bird does not have the midas histapkos. This bird is not happy. And because it's not happy with what it has or with what it happens to find, it satiates itself with what other people find. Whatever it sees, it grabs. It just dives in and takes. The Gemara says in Masechtas Makos, Bach Havakuk, the Navi Havakuk came, V'amidin alachas, and he placed the entire Torah into one rule, and that is the tzaddik b'menasa yichya. The tzaddik lives with his amunah. Amunah, explains the Gra, is this midah of histapkus, to be happy with what you have. In other words, the amunah that what you have is what you are supposed to have. Tzaddik b'menasa yichya. Tzaddik, by nature, comes from the pasuk of tzaddik oichol l'sayva nafshay. The tzaddik eats not what someone else has, but what he has. He's happy. He's satiated with the little bit of food that is available to him. And this is what I have, and this is what I am supposed to have. And he feels full. That's the nature of a tzaddik. And that is the yesod of the entire Torah. So that's why birds of prey are prohibited. And the same is true, explains the Gra, when it comes to behemoths. The simon of malagera, that it chews its cud, symbolizes it's happy with what it has. You gave me a little bit of food, I can chew it again and again. I'm full with it. I'm not looking for more. My precious parsa, split hoofs, is also a sin. That this is not an animal with claws that is looking to attack and to rip into someone else and grab something else. My precious parsa, its hoofs are split. It walks from place to place. It gently pastures. It eats from what the balabas gives it. And the Gra says, let's take this a step further. The lashon is malagera. It chews its cud. Now, if someone has more than enough, he's just swamped with riches, and he's happy, or he's satisfied, that's a madreg. There are plenty of people that are rich and are not satisfied. As a matter of fact, usually, Yashlei Mona writes in the sign. But that's not the ultimate Nisayan. The ultimate Nisayan is to have at least what we perceive is to be less than what we would want, and to be happy with that. And that is the lashon of malagera. Malagera, explains the Gra, comes from the pasuk of Esrin Gera Hashekel. The Targum says Esrin Gera means 20 ma, a coin called a ma, men ayin hay. How much is a ma? Well, a ma is 2 punyonin. A pinyon is a kind of coin. A ma is 2 pinyon. A pinyon is 2 isarin. There's a coin called an isser. So a ma is a total of 4 isarin. Again, a geira is a ma. A ma is equivalent to 2 pinyonin. A pinyon is 2 isurin. So a ma is 4 isarin. What is the point of all of this? What does that have to do with the behemoth being mala geira? Schacter, it's the same word. That geira, which is a coin called ma, in the pasuk of Esrin Geira Hashekel, is connected to the behemoth that is mala geira. How? Well, we know that when the balabas is collecting his tuah and he drops 1 piece or 2 pieces, he's supposed to leave it for the poor people. That's called leket. No one else other than the ani, other than the poor person, is allowed to collect it. Well, what if the poor people aren't coming anymore? It seems that any poor person that wants it already came and took it. So at what point can we say that from here on, anybody can come and take it? So there's a dispute about this in the Mishnah in the Masechtas Peah Perikset, and the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is, if you have a given area where you cannot put together enough tuah that is equivalent to the value of 4 isarin, which is the same as 2 pinyonim, which is the same as a ma or a geira, if you don't have that amount, then you should know the poor people aren't even going to come for it. It's not worth it for them. And therefore anybody can take it. For all practical purposes, it's hefker. Which means that if you do have the amount laying here of 4 isarin, of 4 of these coins, it's still worth it for the poor person to come and take it, and therefore no one else is allowed to take it yet, only the poor people. What is the significance of 4 isarin? So it's explained that it's enough for 4 meals. So suppose this man comes and he can find 4 isarin of tuah, so he can make a simple supper for him and his wife and breakfast for him and his wife. Those are the 4 meals. If he has less than that, it's not worth it for him. If he has that, he's happy. He has food for that night, for the next morning, and the next day. It should be a chef to help him. Schacter, what do you see from here? You see that the symbol of being happy for the day is enough food for supper, for breakfast, 4 isarin, which is equivalent to 2 pinyanim, which is equivalent to a ma, which is the same as a geira. Therefore, the term mala geira coincides over here with the term geira as in the coin geira. When we say we want you to eat a behemoth that is mala geira, what we mean is we want you to eat a behemoth that by nature is mala geira, is satisfied with the minimum supper and breakfast, and he's not worried about the next day. I have for tonight, I have for tomorrow morning, I can provide for me and my wife. That's it. I'm happy for the day. This is the kind of behemoth that the pasuk allows us to absorb into our bloodstream. This is the kind of nature that helps us maintain our neshama, that nourishes the midas of a yid. And that is why eating kosher food is the key to kala terakula. Because kala terakula is included in loisachmoid, and the nature of the food that we eat has to do with who we are. Now let's go back a moment to Remelo Pramishlan's Vart. The pasuk says, Esa chazir, you can't eat the chazer. Why? Ki mafis parsu. Maybe it doesn't attack. But v'hugela la yigar. Pardon the expression. Well, what do we mean when we say a person is a chazer, which we ought not to say, but l'maisa, what does the term mean? It means he's never happy with what he has. V'hugela la yigar. Tami hu lachem. This is tuma. Esa gamo, ki male gerahu. Okay, the gamo may be satisfied with what it has, but how does it attain what it has? It does not represent the animal with the split hoofs that stays put and doesn't attack. So you need both. You need someone that will not take what doesn't belong to him, and by the same token, you need someone that whether he takes what belongs to him or not, is still happy with what he has. Both. So who is the first person the male Pramishlan was giving musr to? Esa chazir. Ki mafis pars, who doesn't take what doesn't belong to him. But v'ugela lo yigar, he doesn't eat. He doesn't want to use up his food. He wants to save it for tomorrow. Es against chnish. No, I can't eat this. Why should I use it all up? And as a result, Nebuchadnezzar's guest sitting next to him doesn't eat as well. Tell me who lachem. If that's the reason that he's not eating, This is Tumah. Eat what you have today. Don't worry about tomorrow. By the same token as Hagamo, this was the other person who helped himself to a lot, but wouldn't dare give something to someone else. Someone else means nothing to him. Oh, he's very happy with what he has. But he doesn't have the split hoof, which, as the Gra explains, represents not clawing into someone else. He's very happy with what he has. As a matter of fact, he's so happy with what he has, he's not willing to share it with anyone. That also is a kind of Tumah. I once heard from Rav Yaakov Galinsky, he said, never despair that people aren't listening to drashos. Because a man came over to me and said, I remember something you said 40 years ago. You said that there are two things from the Aseret HaDibros that everyone has within themselves. At least these two. One is the Noichi, I only think about myself, and the other is La'yeh Lacha, you shouldn't have anything. So you see what Yaakov Galinsky said? I said that 40 years ago, and he still adheres to it. The emes is that if a person already has absorbed, whether it's the wrong food, begashmi is the wrong food, beruchni is the wrong environment in terms of what he listens to, in terms of his friends, and as a result his character traits are not desirable to say the least, Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh is really the time that is more opportune than any other time to change that. Parshas HaChodesh, explains the Chidushei Yarim, introduces a month of miracles, the month of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the month that the Ramban explains we have the miracles that is Kaizeya the Emunah in our heart. As a result, every single individual is mesugal to go R'mayla Meiteva, to break his nature, to be lifted above the vicious cycle of nature that we sometimes put ourselves in. The Chidushei Yarim explains that all other three parshiyos are a hachana to Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh. Parshas Shkolim represents a will to want to donate, to want to rebuild. Parshas Zachar represents a will to uproot the ra that is within us. Parshas Parah represents a will to obtain tahara, to purify ourselves. And accumulatively, if we did the first three parshiyos right, or at least we think back to it now, then we're ready for Parshas HaChodesh, which says, okay, now you're a brand new person. Chodesh Nisan is Chodesh HaAviv, where everything becomes right, where the world is new, and that's just a facsimile of what's happening within our neshamas. You can turn a new page when Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh comes. That doesn't necessarily mean that with the first Ya'aleh V'Yavai, with Chodesh Nisan, you're going to completely change, but it's the first step to change. And that is what Klal Yisrael and Shir Hashirim is referred to as Bas Nodif. Nodif from the Lashon of Nadava, a will to donate. We all want to change. We all want to become better. And now is the time to apply yourself. And the Shabbos before the month of Nisan, explains the Chidushei Yarim, is the time to prepare for that. Because any good thing that happens during the week stems from the Shabbos before. That's why the Chassan is called to the Torah the Shabbos before. So the schoolis of the month of Nisan, this ability to lift ourselves above nature, well, the seeds for this are planted Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps that indeed it should represent a Yitzchakshus for us all. There are certain divrei Torah on the Parsha that are sort of classics. Hardly a child that goes through a cheder doesn't hear it at least once a year. And I love to say these divrei Torah in class and hear children say, oh, we heard that from our 6th grade Rebbe, we heard that from our 7th grade Rebbe, and now you're telling it to us, and I say it to them, and the Yez Hashem Yisborach, your children will hear it. Hakol tzarach l'mazla, filu sefer Torah shebehechel. Even certain vertelach somehow were universally incorporated into the Mamaloshn of Yiddishkeit. And Hanach Lehem Yisrael Emeinan Neviim B'nei Neviim Heim. There's a reason that the children heard it from their 5th grade Rebbe, 6th grade Rebbe, and 7th grade Rebbe. Like the Parsha itself, that we review every single year to always find something new and apply it to the current phase of our life, the same is true for the words of Gedolim throughout the generations. And sometimes it is these very little vertelach that tie us to that Sefer Torah, that keep us going. Now here's a Dvar Torah in Parsha Shmini that is quoted in almost any Sefer that is Malakei Divrei Torah. It's a standard, it's a classic. It's said over in the names of many tzaddikim. And this is the Dvar Torah. After all of the achonics for the Mishkan, the whole Parshas Truma, Parshas Tetzaveh, parts of Kisisa, Vayakel, Pekude, the instructions, the carrying out of the Mishkan, Klal Yisrael is standing here. We are finally ready. Vayomer Moshe Aaron, and Moshe says to Aaron, Kravel HaMizbech, approach the Mizbech. Why did Moshe have to give that final push to Aaron? Why was Aaron hesitating? Zok Rashi, Aaron was embarrassed. He was scared to approach the Mizbech. Why was he scared? Others say because of the Chet Egel and his part in the Chet Egel, although his intention, of course, was to defer the Chet, but Lamaisa, he assumed somewhat of the responsibility of allowing it to get out of control. Or Stam, he didn't hold himself at the Madrega of being the Kohen Gadol. Whatever the case may be, he was embarrassed right now, before he had to step into the Kahuna Gedolah. And therefore he needed some prodding from Moshe. Amalei Moshe, so Moshe said to him, Lama Ata Baish, why are you embarrassed? L'kach nivchata. That's why you were picked. Pashit Pshat. Don't be smarter than the Rebbeinu Shalom. Saif Kosef, the Rebbeinu Shalom also knows whatever accountability you have, whatever responsibilities you have assumed upon yourself, whether you were right or wrong, and the Rebbeinu Shalom still picked you. So almost everyone says, Lama Ata Baish. Why are you embarrassed? L'kach nivchata. Because you're embarrassed, that's the greatest raya that you're worthy. Someone who is not embarrassed and pushes himself up to the front and says, I'm davening Musaf because I'm me, is not worthy to daven Musaf. He's not worthy to give that drasha. He's not worthy to be a manig in Klal Yisrael. It's the person who is not plagued by any self-doubt, and he's perfectly confident that he is worthy of leadership. He is the one that has to reserve jumping into the position. But you, Aaron, if you have the midas habusha, gewaldig. That anivus, that's the makar for Ashras Hashchina. The fact that you're questioning yourself, whether you're worthy or not, that is the biggest raya that you're the man for the job. L'kach nivchata. This is why you were picked. We have to take this part a step further. The bottom line is, Aaron was embarrassed. And his feeling was, this is not for me. Let me step back. So everyone talks about the greatness of Aaron HaKohen. He was embarrassed despite the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu picked him, despite all the great honor that was accorded to him. But we forget the greatness of the second part of the pasuk. As embarrassed as Aaron was, as much as he wanted to shy away, as much as his knees were shaking, and he said, this is not for me, I don't want this. But as soon as Moshe Rabbeinu said, you have no choice, you are ordered to go forward, no second questions are asked. Aaron stepped forward to do the Avodah. You have to look at both sides of the coin, says the Svasenis, in order to truly appreciate this word. We see the greatness of Aaron over here from two perspectives. From the perspective of hesitating, so that it was necessary for Vayomer Moshe Aaron, what's the matter with you? Kravel HaMizbeach, what are you embarrassed for? If Rashi says Aaron was embarrassed, this is real embarrassment. This isn't just, you send someone over to the Amid and he says, nah, let someone else go, but of course you're really hoping that if someone else doesn't go and you're going to be sent. It's just part of the charade. You don't want to look over anxious. So under those circumstances, his hesitation could be really part of the geyser. But that's not the case with Aaron HaKohen. If Rashi over here quoting the Tosefta says Aaron Baish, that means he was really authentically embarrassed. He really would have been happy had someone else stepped forward and taken the assignment. So there's the greatness of Aaron HaKohen. But it's no less greater what we see in the next pasuk. That when Moshe gave him the order, no, but you're the one that was picked, so that's it. If you want me, I have to do it. And if the conclusion is that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants me to do it, whether I'm embarrassed or not, I'm going to step forward courageously. Don't forget the second part of the pasuk over here. When you repeat this Torah, says this Sfas. And then he takes this a step further. He says the truth is, when a person hesitates before embarking on something new, it can be one of two things. It can be something positive. It can be the busha of Aaron HaKohen that shows real anivus, real modesty, that shows that the person is an errant person, always making a cheshbon hanefesh, never quite trusting himself, making himself very well aware that as a human being he is always vulnerable and he always has to check whether he really means it sincerely or not. That kind of a soul-searching is a positive busha. But sometimes busha comes from the Yetzer Hara, explains the Sfas Emes. The busha comes in the guise of modesty, but it's not really modesty. It's just a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-confidence, really a kind of depression that is filtering through in the form of, what's the point, I'm not worthy of this, I can't do it. So it's very important to define a person's instinct sometimes to hesitate before he is given a certain koyach or power or project. How do you know if it's the positive busha or the negative one? It's like the Sfas Emes, look where it leads to. If your attitude is, no, this is not for me, forget it, I'm worthless, I'm a shlamazel, I have two left hands, it'll never work, and then you give it up and give it over to someone else, and then you take a long walk and you feel sorry for yourself, this is the Yetzer Hara. But if you go through those very same hesitations in the form of, is this for me? Am I right for the job? Are there others who can do it better than me? Should I step aside for them? And you're really willing to step aside. And the bottom line is the decision is made whether you take the job or not, but you say, fine, okay, now let me do what I'm supposed to do. Either this or something else. That is real busha. That is positive busha. That is the busha of Aaron HaKohen that leads to greatness. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Kravel Mizbeach. Aaron was embarrassed. Moshe had to prod him on, but we don't know yet whether that embarrassment is positive or negative. But when Aaron was given the clear set instructions, regardless of your own personal doubts, this is your mission, and his response to that was, Vayikra v'Aaron, that I'm going full force, then it became retroactively clear that the busha was genuine, the busha was real, the busha was one of Kiddusha, not Rahman al-Islam, one of depression that represents the opposite of holiness. They say that a bacher once asked Reb Baruch Ber a kasha in the middle of the shir. Now, Reb Baruch Ber, you have to know, had a habit of doing this, of taking a kasha from a bacher and building it up as if it was the greatest kasha that was ever asked since Matan Torah. And often he would do that even at the expense of his own kavod, honor, image. Having said that, Reb Baruch Ber thought about the kasha that bacher asked, repeated the kasha again, who knows if it was even the same kasha if he repeated it, and he said, Gewaldig, what a mighty kasha! Rabbi Zai, I can't go any further with my shir, I have to rethink my whole thought process over here. This bacher asked me such a Gewaldig kasha, I don't know if what I'm saying now is honest, I have to rethink it. Go chazan. And you can imagine the pedestal this bacher was put on. So the Baruch Ber felt that the bacher needed it. This bacher needed a kravel on his beach. Suddenly everybody wanted to be a charusa, and people were coming over to him and discussing the kasha. He got that self-esteem that he needed. But you have to know what to do with it. They say that as they were walking out of the building, so he and Reb Baruch Ber, that is this Talmud that asked the kasha, and Reb Baruch Ber simultaneously approached the door. And Reb Baruch Ber said to the Talmud, you go first. And the Talmud said, Rebbe, I know my kasha was great and you had to stop the shir, but you're still the Rosh Hashiva. And Reb Baruch Ber looked at him and said, what kasha? You're holding a Gemara. That's why I told you to go first. As if to say, look, young man, I want to boost your self-esteem, but it looks like you got over-boosted. I don't need you to acknowledge the fact that I'm the Rosh Hashiva. I want you to feel good about yourself, but not overly good about yourself. And the honest is the only way to avoid falling off either the right side of the road or the left side. Being overly boosted or weighed down by inferiority feelings is hadrach. You can't figure this on your own. And that's the lesson over here that Aaron HaKohen is teaching us. He said, my dear brother Moshe, you want me to assume responsibility? You want me to be mitzvah nefesh myself for Klal Yisrael? I'll do whatever you want. But I want hadracha. I want you to take the achrayus. I am not going to step forward until you give me precise instructions what I am good for, what I have been picked for. And once you do that, all my busha disintegrates and I take over the avodah. And by the same token, this was the downfall of Nadav and Avihu in this same parsha. In the Teres Kohanim we find, just take away that Yetzer Hara from your heart, and then you will see there will be Hashras HaShechina in this Mishkan. What is this Yetzer Hara that they have to be cleansed of before the Yeshua Shechina would take place. Rav Schwab explains it refers to the Yetzer Hara of being a little bit over-anxious, oifziton for Klal Yisrael. He gives a very overwhelming mashal. Imagine, he says, a mother that hugs a child so tight, that expresses such love for the child, that she begins to choke the child when she's hugging him. The koyach of ahava is one of the basic mitzvahs of the Torah. The Ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. It follows the Shema Yisrael. But it has to be constrained by yira. If not, then it can be as devastating as it can be accomplishing. Nadav and Avihu were overwhelmed by Ahavas Hashem Yisbarach. They were overwhelmed by an urge to take control of Klal Yisrael, to be mashbiya Ahavas Hashem and Yira Shemayim. Now, these are real emotions, and it was real Ahava, but it was uncontrolled. They weren't willing to follow rules. When Chazal say that the Chatoyim of Nadav and Avihu were Meir Halacha B'Snei Rabbam, they were Shisuya Yayin, they said Masa Yemusu Shnei Zekenim Ha'elu, we're going to take over. These are all Betuyim, explains Rav Schwab. These are all ways of how the Gemara is expressing. They destroyed the floodgates, and they simply allowed full Ahava to sweep them over. They had ideas of how to give over Ahava of the Rebbeinu Shalom to Klal Yisrael, to feel the Ahava of Hashem Yisbarach, and they wanted to take control without waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu's green light. That was the chait of Nadav and Avihu. That is what the Teres Kayim is referring to. You're going to be privy now to tremendous madregas with the Yeshua Shechina that takes place in the Mishkan. But a prerequisite to that must be that you are willing to follow the rule of law. You cannot act based on your emotion, even though you have the idea that's going to be Masak and Klal Yisrael. The Teres Kainim says, why does it say B'nai Aharon? You want to stress the fact they were B'nai Aharon, and they didn't ask advice from Aaron. Nadav and Avihu, you have an uncle like Moshe Rabbeinu. You can't say, we're uncle, these are our feelings, this is what we want to accomplish. Are we right? Is the time right for it now? Ishmachtasai, there's another sign on them. They didn't even take counsel from each other. If you don't have a mentor to guide you, at least ask your friends. At least work with someone else. It was sheer, unrestrained ahava that was not going to be subject to any kind of advice or counsel. And that's what we say every morning, explains Rav Schwab, we're asking Hashem to force our Yetzer Hara to be subjugated to you. Now, we already were mispal the al tishlot banu Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara should have no effect on us. And v'davkeinu b'Yetzer Toiv. Why is it necessary to add, and Rebbeinu Shalom, we beg of you, force the Yetzer Hara to be subjugated to you? Because this Yetzer Hara is a very confusing Yetzer Hara. It sometimes wears the guise of the Yetzer Toiv. We can be inspired to do good, but if we're not willing to listen, an overwhelming of good can also drown someone. The term Yetzer is the koyach hayetzira, the koyach of creation, the teva that is within a human being that must be restrained, that must be disciplined. Pinchas was also overwhelmed with emotion, with anger, l'man kloit shenayim. But he contained it until he got the green light from Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why he was zeichet to kahuna. So Schwab says, he said he heard this from an ish ne'eman, from a trusted person. Reb Chaim Volozhiner once went to his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, and he said to him, I have a great idea. Let's start a yeshiva. There was no official yeshiva in that whole area of Europe. The whole concept of a yeshiva in this format never existed yet. I want to start a Volozhiner yeshiva that's going to produce the Rosh yeshiva that's going to be the power plant for Torah until Mashiach comes. And the Vilna Gaon gave him a very cold response. Maybe yeah, maybe not. We'll see. Definitely didn't get the feeling that he was being encouraged, so Reb Chaim Volozhiner put everything on hold. I was the greatest idea in the world. He perceived it to be the greatest idea in the world. If the Rebbe did not say, Kravelam is Be'ach, he stands back. A while later, Reb Chaim Volozhiner went into the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon asked him, no, so what's doing with the yeshiva? He says, but the Rebbe didn't encourage me. I never pursued it. So the Vilna Gaon said to him, I want to tell you something. When you came to me, originally, and you presented the plan, it came with such a hislavas. You were so overwhelming in your arguments. There was such a burning desire within you to do it. I wasn't sure if it was a source of Kedusha, or maybe it was this uncontrollable ahava that sometimes spills over the boundaries and is not necessarily positive. But if you're telling me despite your tremendous inspiration and your drive, you put everything on hold because I didn't give you a positive response, the Gra didn't tell him no. He just didn't give him an encouraging response. If you're telling me you were able to put everything on the side, I now know that it is real, controlled ahava with origins in Kedusha, that indeed is going to do all those things you wanted to do, provide Torah for Klal Yisrael. Now go and start the yeshiva. In other words, you have exhibited enough busha for me to tell you, Krabelam is there. Friday night, B'davka explains of Schwab, when there is an overflow of ahava, we say, L'fon of Naboy, B'yir of to control that ahava, so that it's directed and focused correctly. And finally, the Chadush Yarim says that we ought to be consoled a lot from the lesson of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu was Zechet and Madregas that we can never even imagine. L'maisa, their efforts ended in failure. Why? Asher Tziva. But Hashem never commanded them to do it. Kal v'chomer, says the Chadush Yarim, Mida Tova Meruba. When we Yidden don't have the cheshik to do a mitzvah, we don't feel this overwhelming love and this magnetic force drawing us, but we do it only because Asher Tziva, because Hashem did command us to do it. So Hashem guarantees the success of our endeavors, and it is as if we were mechavein all the kavanos and the yichudim that perhaps only Nadav and Avihu really understood. If you passed by a Gayish restaurant and you saw, never mind the dish, but you just saw the menu, and the menu suggested that there is a special today on a soup that is full of insects or worms, spiced with a special flavoring, the chances are you will be nauseated by this, and you will quickly move away from it. However, why will you quickly move away from it? Because indeed you are repulsed by the even mention of someone consuming this? Or is it because the Torah told us that you are not permitted to eat it? Let's discuss now another Nakuda. Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned many, many times throughout the Torah. But there's only once where the pasuk doesn't say, I am Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim. Rather, the pasuk says, I am Hashem who lifted you out of Mitzrayim. This lifting out of Mitzrayim, as opposed to being taken out of Mitzrayim, seems to represent more of a starting point, or more of a lofty crossroad for Klal Yisrael, where they were lifted into the right domain, into an area of Kedusha. Where is it? Where does the pasuk use the lashon of hamayla, of lifting, as opposed to being brought out? The answer is in regard to shlosim. At the end of Parashas Shmini, after the pasuk discusses al teshaksus nafshesechem v'chol hasheret hashayretz l'sitamu behem, the pasuk goes on to say in Kapitel Yud Aleph pasuk Memhei, Ki ani Hashem hamala eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. And Rashi points out, this is the only time we have this lashon of hamala eschem. Normally it says hoseisi, here it says hamala. So Rashi quotes what was taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel. Tana the Rabbi Shmuel teaches us, Ilamole lo heleisi as yisrael mi Mitzrayim, elo b'shul she'ein mitamin b'shatim. Had I not brought Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, or rather had I not lifted Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, only for this reason, that they do not defile themselves with swarming things, kisha umay zayin, that would have been sufficient for them. Umay lusihi kabayu, for they have this elevation, they have this inyan that they excel in, that they stay away from eating shrotim. Zehu lashon maila, and this is the meaning of the word maila. What does Rashi mean over here? Why does this mitzvah of not eating shrasim represent our being lifted out of Mitzrayim more so than any of the other mitzvahs, more so than any of the other great Mesilas Nefesh mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael committed themselves to Bris Milah, to the Karban Pesach, to defying Avodah Zarah, to Shmiras Shabbos? What is so special about not eating a sheretz that the fact that we don't warrants this expression? We are lifted out of Mitzrayim. I always wondered, when it comes to Morah, Klal Yisrael is so busy, making sure that chas v'shalom there are no tailoim, no worms on their mar. For Chazal tell us, if someone eats a certain kind of reptile like a arba, he can be mechuyev malchus 4 times. Normal if someone eats an ant like a chamesh, he is lashed 5 times. Sira for a certain kind of bee or hornet like a shesh, he gets lashes 6 times. For the eating of shrasim there are multiple aveiros. Loises is diarais. On the other hand, the mitzvah of morab is not as only drabanan. So we want to be careful not to sacrifice multiple diaraises for a kiyum of 1 drabanan, where in most circumstances you aren't even allowed to sacrifice being over aveiros diaraises for a kiyum of a diaraisa. More incidentally, bisman hazeh the drabanan. In the times of the Korban Pesach, it was a deraisa. So of course, because we have a different meaning that we're yotze morer with, and those meaning could be prone to tailoim if they're not checked, if they're not taken from the proper sources. So there's always an issue about this. But still, Hanachim Yisraelim, Ein Nevi'im, B'nai Nevi'im, and everything is a shgacha process. And there has to be some connection between the inyan of not eating shrasim and the mitzvah of Pesach, particularly the mitzvah of Morah. Based on the writings of Rosh Schwab, Zecher Tzadik L'Vracha, and the Sefer Me'en Beis HaSheva, I would like to present to you the following theme that is going to connect the Yezid Hashem Yisbarach all of these inyanim that we just laid out on the table. In Parshas Kedoshim, the pasuk also discusses not eating things that are not kosher, including shratzim, and the pasuk concludes, "V'avdu eschem min ha'amim liyasli," and I have you apart from the people that you shall be mine. Imatem izdolim, if you set apart from them, hariyatem shuli, you're mine. V'yim lav, and if not, if you are going to consume these types of food, hariyatem shal Nebuchadnezzar v'chaveir, so you belong to Nebuchadnezzar and his friends, not to me. That's the chazal that Rashi quotes. And then Rashi quotes as follows. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer. Then 9. How do we know? Shelo yomer adam, a person should not say, nafshi kotza mitzachazir, I loathe swine's flesh. Or, efshi lilvash klayim, I simply can't put on clothes with wool and linen mixed into it. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable. It bothers me. No, that's not the attitude. Aval yomer, rather he should say, efshi. He should say, I do desire it. Uma asa, but what can I do? The Avi Shavashamayim, my Father in heaven, God their life was guided on me. How do I know that this is the proper attitude? The latter mahalach? Talmud Loimer, therefore the pasuk says, the Avdul Enchem min ha'amim liyas li, shetei havdu lachem. You're setting apart him from not eating these things. Should be for what reason? L'shmi. Payesh minu aveira. I'm not doing this because it's an aveira. Or mekabel or malchus shemayim. So the next time you pass by a store or a supermarket and you see lobsters over there, which repulse you, which make you hold your stomach, and you want to get away as soon as possible, you're supposed to stop, and you're supposed to think about what Chazal tell us over here. No, the reason I'm not eating it is not because it's disgusting to me. The reason I'm not eating it is because the Rabbeinu Shalom told me not to eat it. I would get into this, so to speak, if I were permitted. May not be very geschmack, but look, a lot of things aren't geschmack the first time. No one really enjoys their first cigarette. They only do it because someone else does it. And afterwards they get into it, or their first bottle of beer, or a bottle of schnapps. But the way they say in Yiddish, it's Appetit kommt mit dem Essen. The appetite comes with eating. So that's what you're supposed to think when it comes to shratzim. You're supposed to say, listen, I could get to like this, maybe. But the reason I'm not doing it is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me not to do it. And as a result, I'm a kamal of Oil Malchus Shemayim. The emes is, this should be our attitude in regard to all others. The famous story, I'm sorry for that, he once helped out one of the Balabatim in his community. He was about to completely collapse financially, and he arranged loans for him. He personally went ahead and lent him money. Later, when the person came back to pay the sum cipher, he thanked him so much for saving him and keeping it a secret. He paid him back the money, and he said, as a gift, here's this beautiful tabatushka, a silver spice box. And the Sefer picked it up and he said, it's so beautiful, it's so gorgeous, it's so wonderful. And the Sefer's children were standing there aghast, they were shocked. he wouldn't be permitted to take it. It would be ribbis. You don't pay someone for a loan. And the Chassam went on and on to admire and praise this gorgeous tabak pushka, and finally turned to him and said, but you know I'm not permitted to take it. There's even a shalom whether you can say thank you for a loan. The Chassam later explained to his Talmidim that this is the first time that it was presented to him, this mitzvah of not taking ribbis. But the tabak pushka was so meaningless to him that he felt it's a mitzvah that requires no mysterious nefesh. So he wanted to be mekayim with Chazal. He wanted to first work up the beauty of this tabak fischel, to learn to appreciate it, and then to return it. The emes is that we should do that in regard to all mitzvahs. But we don't. Why? Because in regard to most mitzvahs, it's dangerous. If you're going to take something, if you and me are going to take something that is awesome, and we're going to try this approach to fulfill what the Elazar ben Azariah said, oh, it's so beautiful, oh, it's so wonderful, oh, it's so geschmack, there's a danger. It may just stop there and we'll decide it's taka soga shmak. Let's use it. Let's take it. Let's eat it. So we don't do that. Although in terms of being makabel of oil malchus shemayim, that would be the right way to do it. But by the same token, one is prohibited to place himself in a nisayon, to deliberately immerse oneself in a test. You don't do that either. Well, that's more dangerous. It's not worth the chance. Even though if someone is faced with an assignment, he's faced with a craving temptation to do something that is awesome, and he puts the brakes on and says, no, I really want this, but the Rebbeinu Shalom says, no, I'm not going to think about this, I'm not going to look at this, I'm not going to listen to it, I'm not going to eat it, whatever the assignment is, I'm not going to take it. So the reward is tremendous. The greater the assignment, the greater the reward. Like the Mishnah says, in Avos, if you're mevatel your will for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kadosh Baruch Hu is mevatel His will for you. That means you have a koyach of tefillah. You can break zeiros that have been previously established. So it would be great if every single day we had a tremendous temptation for something and we held ourselves back because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to do it. So we're mevatel our rotzen for the rotzen of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That would give us tremendous power. Like Yosef Atzadik was zeichet to such malchus and power, precisely because he was faced with that Messiah, with the ultimate Messiah. But we can't allow ourselves to go into an assignment, chas v'shalom, to do that. And we won't have the Siyat Shmini to overcome it. David HaMelech was faulted for asking for an assignment, even though he didn't physically take the assignment upon himself, but he asked for one, and the name there were tzares. The Gemara says in Bava Basra, this person has two ways to go, and along one of the routes, the women are there washing the laundry, and the person takes the route where he could be nichshol in riyos asurais. Even if Lamaisa, when he gets to that point, he turns his head away and closes his eyes, the Rashbam says he's still called a Rasha. You don't put yourself into an assignment. There's another option. So therefore, let's put things into perspective. The greatest thing in the world is when a person has a craving and a ratzon to do an aveira, and he says, no, I'm not going to do it because the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to do it. But you can't put yourself into an assignment. But don't worry, there are plenty of nisayonos that come whether we put ourselves into it or not. Are we ready for them when they come on their own? That depends how we prepare ourselves. How do we prepare ourselves? By sort of ingraining within us, by internalizing this inyan that we're ready to be mevatel our ratzon before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, take this mashal. We're training a soldier how to fight. So first, the trainer is going to give him a gun without live ammunition. Why? Because he wants to train him how to hold the gun, how to turn on and turn off the safety lock, how to take aim, how to run with the gun, how to put it away, how to clean it, how to reload it, how to fix it when it's broken. And he would rather do this without live ammunition. Because if he's going to start teaching someone who's uninitiated with this and untrained, it will start teaching him with live ammunition. This person may wipe out his whole platoon just by trying to put away his submachine gun into the closet. So we train him first without any ammunition. Then we may train him with the kinds of ammunition that aren't so dangerous. And as he learns how to hold the gun, and he learns all the safety precautions, and he learns how to use it, we will give him more and more lethal ammunition until he is a trained soldier. Shkotzim and Ramasim, in a sense, is our base mitzvah. It is the mitzvah that Hashem lifted us out of Mitzrayim with. Why? Because it's our training ground. If I told you work up a craving for a certain Aveira, and then don't do the Aveira, that's dangerous. But if I told you, work up a craving for eating shrotzim, and then hold yourself back because the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you to do it, that's pretty much safe ground. Because between you and me, as much as we're going to try to work up a craving to eat shrotzim, it's going to be a shvacha temptation. And we would really have to convince ourselves that we like it. Why? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom has ingrained within Klal Yisrael a natural detesting of this. We loathe it. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into place by Yetzias Mitzrayim. In a sense, what it is, it's a kind of an unloaded gun. We can play around with the idea of a temptation and then practice stopping because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to do it. We can do that because the temptation will never be that great anyway. It's safe territory. I'm not scared of a person working up the temptation to eat that sheretz and then saying, I can't hold myself back, I'm going to eat it. Then we go from there to other kinds of averas. For example, dam. The Torah says, Rak chazak lezot yachol dam. And Chazal tell us how much you have to be mechazik yourself with mitzvahs. Madach dam, which is easy to stay away from dam. No one has a taiva to drink dam. Despite that it requires chizuk, how much more so other mitzvahs. Now, by dam, we're not so naturally repelled from it the way we are by shvatim. Like Schwab explains, if I told you this piece of meat wasn't properly kashered, wasn't properly salted, but it was a geschmacka piece of meat, you'd still have a taiva to eat it. You wouldn't naturally be repelled by the dam. So here there's a warning sign. Here it requires chizuk. Be careful. Of course, ultimately I want you to not eat it l'shem shemayim. But don't get too involved into the taiva. Here's where we start using already a little bit live ammunition. When it comes to inyanim of gneva or gezela, or inyanim of kiddusha and holiness and watching our eyes, here, chas v'shalom, here we have to stay away. Never to engage in a sign. But we know the Sionis are going to come. And we have to be ready to say, I want it, but I won't do it because the Rebbeinu Shem doesn't want me to do it. And the training ground for that, that's the mitzvah shrotzim. The mitzvah shrotzim is the mitzvah ki ani Hashem hamal eschem yeretz Mitzrayim. I am lifting you up. You are now a proud soldier in Hashem's army. We begin our training. We're starting with the mitzvah shrotzim. It's not live ammunition because there's no real time. As a matter of fact, you're naturally repulsed from it. But work on the concept. Work on the idea. I would take it. I would consume it. I would like it. I'm not doing it because the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to do it. And ultimately it is the Ratzon Hashem that decides my green lights and my red lights in life. And using shrotzim as a basis, you incorporate this idea into your thinking, into the way your heart feels, into the way your mind looks into things. And from there you go on to mitzvahs, that perhaps the time is a little greater, but you have been already trained to say no, that the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want me to do it. And from there we go on to the nisyonos in life that we would never chas v'shalom ask for, but come on their own. And if we went through our training properly, starting with the mitzvah of shrotzim, we have already internalized, we have already put into our very selves the mechanism that says, I want it, but the Ratzon Hashem is to say no. And then we face the ultimate challenge of saying no, when there's a title that really drives us. We were taught how to use the weapons against the Yetzer Hara first with fake ammunition, and then we are trained how to use it when we're faced with the real thing. Yetzias Mitzrayim represents the battle against the person's personal Mitzrayim, against all of the boundaries that inhibit his growth in Kiddusha. But the first step is Ki Ani Hashem Hamal Esem, the first step where I'm lifting you into the training ground, that is the mitzvah of Shvat. Yisrael Belsky was angezinnt in the Smicha Shir, so he cuts up a cow, a ben Pekua, not a live cow, and goes through the Yudches Treifes. So I remember when I was a student, so he took out the Gid Anosha, showed us the Gid Anosha, and I kept it in my refrigerator in the dorm room. And someone opened up the refrigerator, I said, I'm chabad you with a mitzvah. The Derech B'Gedecho says you should do this. Here's the Gid Hanasha, and you're not eating it because the Kadosh Baruch Hu told you not to eat it. That's also a safe taiva. Never mind that it teaches a person a lesson not to open someone else's refrigerator again.
This shir is distributed by Kolodas, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-02 Post Box 57035.